of all, the League's mission has always been to encourage active and informed citizen participation in our government, and we underline the word informed citizen participation. So we're thrilled that you're here, and we're thrilled that we will have people viewing this tape as well. So that's terrific. The League of Women Voters is a multi-tiered grassroots organization. We are local, we are regional, we are state, and we are national. That's how the League of Women Voters functions. We are a multi-issue political organization. We have positions, we call those positions, they're actually our stand, our platform. And those positions are based on studies that the League has done, and the League members have built consensus around those. We have many of those positions. You can go to our website, lwvalameda.org, to see the local, state, national, regional, all the positions. They are basically filed under 3 categories: government, natural resources, and social policy. So we are a political organization. We are also a nonpartisan organization, which means that we never endorse a candidate. And I like to repeat that again, since it's a candidates night. We never support or oppose any candidate. We do, however, based on our platforms, take positions on measures that we believe benefit our communities and help to protect democracy. So we try to separate the 2 hats that we wear, my little signs again: voter service, action. We have action items available, separated tonight. They're over there at the back table. If you see Ruth Dixon Mueller shaking a flyer right there, that is where you will find League recommendations from the State League on state ballot measures. And the local League, the League of Women Voters of Alameda, we have a position on the city ballot measures. We have discussed those, and those are over there. We try to keep those separate. We lobby, we legislate. We do that under action. That is part of who we are based on our studies. We also do voter education, which is what most people are most familiar with that we do. We register voters, you all know that. We host candidates forums, and we're thrilled that our city council candidates have agreed to participate this evening, and they're all here in attendance. And we write articles, and we try pros and cons. We try to provide non-biased voter information. You can also go to Voters Edge. This is an online, non-biased, balanced information, pros and cons of ballot measures, plus candidates' profiles. So we encourage you to do that. You can also follow the money here as well. Now, speaking of that, that's my segue for the charts that you found on your chairs. You also should have received a Voters Edge bookmark too, and we hope you take that home and put it on your refrigerator or bulletin board. So let me read this for the charts. Political campaigns cost money, and even in our relatively small town, it's expensive to run for public office. The League of Women Voters supports campaign finance practices that ensure full disclosure of campaign contributions and expenditures. Our commitment is to transparency and helping voters make informed decisions. The League has developed tools to help the public see how much candidates for mayor and city council have raised, and more importantly, the sources of the money. The campaign finance charts distributed tonight indicate contributions received by candidates for mayor and city council. For the city ballot measure K, you can find that information over on the recommends table. The data in this report, in these reports, is taken directly from the forms candidates and committees file with the Alameda City Clerk and represent filings as of September 22nd. And we hope to have them updated again because the next filing period, I believe, is October 25th. And we hope to have them updated and on our website available for your viewing. This financial information that is in the charts and is also available on our website please go to the homepage, which is lwvalameda.org, to access all the campaign finance material that we have available. And with that said, I would ask you to please join me in welcoming this evening's moderator, league member Mark Hamilton.
The focus of our forum this evening is the exploration of the views and attitudes of our candidates for the City Council of the City of Alameda. The format will be a modified debate format. The League has provided each candidate in advance with a copy of the basic ground rules, which I'll now outline for our friendly audience. The audience will kindly refrain from applauding or in other ways demonstrating support or non-support for a candidate. Number two, there will be no video or audio recordings during the event except for that being done by the League, which will be posted on our website. Number three, candidates will remain seated at all times during the debate, will not use props, and will neither interrupt one another nor refer to each other in their responses. Number four, the moderator, that's me, will have the responsibility of enforcing time limits and or interrupting the proceedings to enforce the ground rules and the agreed to format. Questions from the audience will be submitted in writing and may be reworded and or combined by the moderator. There are 5 candidates for 2 positions on the board. They have, on the council, sorry, not on the board, on the council. They have drawn numbers for the order in which they will speak and are seated. And the order is from left to right: Robert Matz, Jim Audie, John Knox-White, Stuart Chen, and Tony Desog. Each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes for an opening statement. After the opening statements, we will move to a period of written questions prepared by the League of Women Voters, followed by an audience questions as time allows. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. The order of answering the questions will be rotated based on the opening order of opening statements this evening. Cards are available for the audience members who wish to submit a question or questions. We will try to cover a variety of topics in the limited time available. And be aware that we will most likely not be able to ask all of the questions presented. We encourage you to speak directly to the candidates at the close of the evening. At the end of the question period, each candidate will have 2 minutes to give a closing statement. The order of closing statements will be in the reverse order of the opening statements. In the interest of fairness and equal allocation of time, all answers will be timed and time limits will be enforced. Our timekeeper is Susan Hauser. She is seated in the front row. And our timer will be giving a 30-second warning with a yellow card, and then a signal to stop with a red stop sign card when the time has expired. We ask each candidate to please adhere as strictly as possible to the time limits. Our question sorters are Marilyn Eng and Heather Salamini Fowler. Sorry about that, I read the name. And at this time, we'll take 2 minutes for each candidate to give opening statements, starting with Mr. Matz.
Hello everyone, my name is Robert Matz, and I am asking for your vote, for one of your 2 votes for City Council. We need a new voice. In politics, I'm kind of known as the newcomer, the new guy. But if you ask people outside of political circles, they'll tell you, I know exactly who that guy is. That's Coach Matz. That's the lawyer who kept me in business, kept me in my home, kept me out of trouble. That's the guy who volunteered to serve hot dogs in the snack bar because nobody else would do it. That's the guy who plays ukulele and drives that cool old Volvo. I'm a father, I'm a husband, a brother, a true friend, and I'm a concerned citizen. And that last one is a big part of why I'm running. I'm running because our city is in deep economic trouble, and I know what's going to happen if we don't get our fiscal house in order. Bankruptcy, busted pensions, busted lives. I'm endorsed by the city treasurer and the city auditor and the sitting mayor because they know I will work with them to help the city find a way out of this fiscal crisis. I'm running to make sure we prioritize spending on the things we all need on a daily basis. Shuttles to get to work and to the ferry, to get our kids to school, to get new customers to our business. I'm running to give voice to Asian communities that comprise more than 34% of our island, but don't have a fair say in our politics. I'm running because I know how to go through volumes of legalese and separate fact from fiction, the plausible from pie in the sky. I'm running because I love this city and I know I can help make it better with your help and for all of you, not just special interests.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for putting on this forum. I think this is always one of the most informative forums of any election, whether I'm running or not running. It's always one of the ones I always make it a point to attend. My name is Jim Odie. I've been honored to serve as your council member the last 4 years, and I'm humbly here asking for your support for another term. In my second term, I'm going to continue working on the priorities we've worked on in my first term. You know, first of all, this city's in a good place in a lot of areas. One of them is most exciting is that we finally broke ground after 20 years at Alameda Point, bringing much needed jobs, infrastructure, and importantly, housing to the former naval base. I think one of my top priorities is going to continue to be to keep you all safe, to make sure that our police and our fire services are adequately funded, to make sure that our children are safe when they play in the streets. Our seniors, when they cross in crosswalks, they're not run over by speeding cars. That when our businesses are burglarized or burned down or our business owners are murdered or attacked, that we have the resources to make sure those crimes are prevented or solved. That when you call 911 and you need an ambulance, that someone will be there fast so they can provide fast, much needed life-saving support services. I also think we need to continue to work on solving the housing crisis. The housing crisis is not only just an Alameda issue, it's a Bay Area issue, it's a California issue, and we've been doing a lot of work on the City Council to make sure we solve that by increasing our supply. We also have to make sure that we protect our most vulnerable tenants, our elderly and our seniors and our vulnerable renters. We also have to make sure we continue to be compassionate towards our homeless neighbors. And lastly, you know, we have to continue to fight for our progressive values and make sure that everyone belongs here. Whether that's somebody that's using cannabis for medicine, whether that's somebody of a different color, a different race, a different orientation, with or without their papers, I believe everyone belongs here. I love Alameda, it's a great place to live, and I want to keep our quality of life high so we all can enjoy this wonderful community together.
Good evening, my name is John Knox-White. I am a 17-year resident of Alameda. I've lived here with my wife and family. We've raised 2 boys, both of whom are off at college now. So I needed to find something to do with my time. During the last 17 years, I've spent 6 years on our planning board and 7 years chairing our transportation commission. I've been the chair of the Economic Development Strategic Plan Task Force and the vice chair of the Sunshine Task Force, which helped to rewrite the open government and disclosure laws for our city. That's what I've done, but when I think about why I'm running, I think about I started knocking on doors and talking to voters back in March, and about 3.5 months ago now, I knocked on a door, spoke to a woman who wasn't very interested in speaking. She had it with politicians. She didn't have a lot of trust in the kind of the city and the process that was happening, and she started to tell me that she was a cancer patient. And she was living in her second home. She had lost her first home through no fault of hers or the landlord's, but she was living in a place now where any rent increase that she sees is going to possibly push her out. And she broke down in tears. She talked about what that would mean to her, losing her family, losing her support system, and most importantly, losing access to her medical care because she would not be able to afford to live in this region before. We talked for about 30 minutes. And you know, really at the end of the day, it's those kinds of really human values that I think we need to be paying attention to in this city. And it's the type of thing that I bring to every decision that I'm making, really trying to think about what is the impact on people and how can we solve really complex problems by making sure that we listen to people, bring people together, and then put plans into action. Over the 13 years I've been on the Planning Board and the Transportation Commission, I have a long history of showing that I can do that I can work with people, and I will tell you more later.
Hello, my name is Stuart Chen. I can tell you about my experiences in public service, going back to 2000 Social Service Board, Human Relations Board, Hospital Board, City Council. But I think I'm going to take this 2 minutes and talk about why I'm running. 2000, I still remember, I am scared to death in public speaking. I mean, just like your typical Asian, keep it under radar, pay your bills, go to school, take care of your kids. That's not for us. Politics is not for us. So when Ralph Abasado appointed me to Social Service Board, I was petrified. I remember my first city council meeting. Ralph said, "Hey, Stuart, you can't get off that easy. Come on the stage, accept the nomination, tell us about yourself." But I do it. I'm still scared of public speaking. I do it. Why? Equity. Asian Americans are 32% of this island, and most of them are like me. Foreign-born, immigrant, came here 40 years ago from the Philippines. And, you know, we work hard, we take orders, but it's time that we take a seat at the table. We need equity. Not just ethnicity, but family background. As an immigrant, I know some of the trials and tribulations and the struggles that we go through that you will never, ever imagine. Stuff that we do, stuff that we don't do. Look around the room here. Alameda is 32% Asian. Do you see 32% Asian here? No. There has not been a lot of outreach to our Asian brothers and sisters. And as scary as public speaking is, the thought of not being represented scares me even more. Thank you.
Good government. Good government is at the core of what the League of Women Voters is about. It's in your DNA. That is the reason why I'm running for City Council. I'm running for City Council because I want to renew residents' trust in City Hall. I want residents to know that City Hall and its council members will work on behalf of the people of Alameda and the businesses owners here, and not on behalf of special interests. In the case of what happened to Jill Kaimak, basically our former city manager was sacked by the fire union. And that strikes at the very core of our governmental form, our city manager form of government. It strikes at the very core of our democracy. And for those who care about good government, we need a city council majority that's going to listen to and work with the people. In my time as a council member in the past, I've always been available at the farmer's market or at coffee shops in an effort to show that, that I'm accountable to the persons of Alameda. It doesn't matter if I have my background in city planning from Cal or a master's in that, or if I work in urban planning as my profession. All that is nice, but what matters the most is that I'm able to ask the questions of our city staff that you are concerned about in an effort to make sure to get the right information and make the best decisions possible for the citizens of Alameda based upon a fair evaluation of the facts and not on politics.
If you would pass the microphone all the way down to this end again, we'll start our question period. We're going to be using a prepared question for the beginning of each of the 2 rounds of questioning. There'll be a round of questions now, and there'll be a round after our break in a little while. So we'll start with a question for Mr. Matz to begin with his response. In your opinion, what are the major pros and cons of a strong mayor versus a weak mayor form of local government?
Obviously, the pros. I grew up in Chicago. Mayor Daley was kind of known as a very strong mayor, maybe a bit too strong, if you know what I mean. So the pro is that you can get stuff done. If that's a good vision, and that's a vision that moves the city forward, that can be a very good thing. I lived in Seoul, Korea for 2 years. We went, we left. When I came back, they had a fantastic mayor, strong mayor. He moved the buses to the middle of the street. He cleaned up the streets. He restored rivers that were polluted. It looked like a different city. And when you asked around town, it was a very strong mayor that made that happen. The cons, I think, is suggested by the Mayor Daley model. If it's, the con is that it's my way or the highway. And if you happen to not be in the camp that is going to be serviced by whatever that agenda is, then too bad for you. And get out of the way, and you're going to get bulldozed. And we've seen a little bit of that. When you get moneyed interest and special interest, and that engine, that political machine gets rolling, it steamrolls everything in its way, and it doesn't matter whether it's the best interest of the citizens. What's best for the machine is what often gets done. So it's my response.
So thank you for that question. I don't think we've ever been asked to give our thoughts on that issue in detail more than a simple yes or no question. It's interesting because that issue's come up recently. So I guess maybe it's come up because some people like one mayor versus another mayor, or didn't like one mayor versus the other mayor. But I'm perfectly comfortable with our current setup, which we have a professional staff, and that's the critical adjective there, professional staff that can kind of be set aside from the politics. All of us interact with all of you every day, whether we're in the coffee shops or in Safeway. The other day I was at Kinko's and somebody asked me, should I know you from somewhere? And then he recognized me. So, I think that's critical that we're able to maintain that as policymakers, that critical one-on-one contact. And if you do have a strong mayor, then you are having an elected person make those decisions. And that person, does have to go out and run, and does have to raise money, and does have to, answer to the voters. But I think it's important that we keep the system we have, where we have a professional staff, again, underlying professional, that is accountable to the council, and the council, like all of us, is accountable to the voters, people like you.
Thank you. You're probably going to hear the same answer from a lot of us. But I think the pros are that when you have somebody who is effective and who is good at listening to the community and making tough decisions, they can really move the needle on something. Jerry Brown instituted the Strong Mayor Forum over in Oakland while he was mayor through a vote of the people, and he accomplished a lot. He's not everybody's favorite mayor over there, but I think he showed that what somebody who is thoughtful and has a vision can do. I think we had some subsequent mayors that followed him that showed a lot of the downfall. Just because you can get elected doesn't mean that you actually have the administrative chops to run a city. And I think, we look around at cities our size. Most of the cities our size have actually what we used to have, which is an elected five-member body, and that body chooses the mayor. I think it was the early 90s when Alameda decided to directly elect their mayor. We actually probably made the wrong decision, because we set an expectation that the elected mayor is somebody different than a council member, instead of the person who just nominates boards and commissions and runs the meeting. I am fully interested in having this discussion, including the strong mayor with our community. I think we should actually consider whether we should go back to a form that works for the cities our size and sets an appropriate expectation. The cons really are I work in San Francisco. I've done a lot of work in Oakland. They both have strong mayors. It doesn't get rid of strife. It sets up an adversarial, often, relationship between the council and the mayor, and you have a lot of political fighting. Bodies that are trying to grab whatever statutory power they have. It does not make things smooth, and you can have a lot of infighting that happens, and it gets pretty ugly. And I think this is again a very good conversation to have, but I think the cons far outweigh the pros.
So I'm still puzzled and surprised that people stop and ask me, how much do the council member get? How much do the mayor get? It's a volunteer position, and people don't get it. What we have here is like a board of directors and your executive director. The board of directors, city council, including mayor, and the mayor is also one council member. She has one vote, but the difference is she runs the meeting. I'm not elected, city council members and the mayor. Compose myself for a second. Yes. So hire and fire the city manager, but do not interfere with the day-to-day operation. It's just plain and simple. The professionals that we hire, city manager, city attorney, the department heads, they have the skill sets. And that's what we hire them for, their skills that can help run Alameda like it's supposed to be run. Having a strong mayor has its drawbacks. And, well, for one, if we have a strong mayor, none of us, all 5 of us will not be running. It's a full-time job. All 5 of us have a day job. A strong mayor will require a mayor who has certain skill sets and willing to give up her day job to run the city. A city manager, on the other hand, is trained for years to have experience to run the city government. So I'm happy with the way it is. It's a strong city manager, city council type of government, and that's how it's done in the rest of the small city in California.
In the debate between a strong city manager form of government versus a strong mayor form of government, I rest solely in favor of a strong city manager. But that's as obvious as the sun rising in the morning, because the city manager form of government is in the DNA of Alameda. It is part of the city charter. And it's a part of the city charter for larger national historic reasons that have to do with the rise of the progressive movement, fighting political corruption, the likes of which Tammany Hall. But it's also part of the city charter for historical reasons here in the city of Alameda because of the crisis that happened at the city manager level in the 1930s. So there's a reason why we have a city manager form of government and the city council, including the mayor, serving as a policy-setting board. I think in order to make the city manager a form of government work, though, you need to have a city council who respects the expertise that the city manager and the department head bring, and who's able to call into question when they see things that are wrong. And that's an important point for the following reason. Because we have a problem here in Alameda. If you think about it, what's the common thing in the loss of Jill Kymack as a city manager, in the loss of Anna Marie Gallant as a city manager, in the loss of Debbie Corrida as a city manager? Now, Lisa Goldman, maybe she could have been city manager, but she went to Burlingame. We have a problem in Alameda where we're not respecting women city managers, and we need to change that.
If you would pass the microphone back to Mr. Odie, we'll get started with our second question. We'll take 3 audience questions, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back with 1 prepared question from the league and 4 more questions from the audience. So, number 2. This is the question. Do you support the proposed 1/2 cent sales tax increase, and what do you think will be the specific consequences if it does not pass?
Okay, well, that's a pretty easy one. I was one of the, I think it was 4 of us that voted to put it on the ballot. So I support it. I think it's critical that we find different ways to increase revenue in the city. We went back to the voters 2 years ago with the Utility Modernization Act, where we modified our UUT, which is our utility user tax, so everyone could pay their fair share, because if you had a landline, you were paying, but if you had certain cell phone providers, you weren't paying. There are other things we can also do to help raise revenue, and we really haven't gone out to our voters much to ask you to raise revenue. We've been doing most of our balancing through our property tax, our transfer tax, and budget cutting over the past few years. I guess the consequences are, you've seen the numbers. If we see these every year, if you look 5 years out, the city staff will tell you, if you do nothing, this is what your number is going to be, and there's a deficit going out 5 years. You know, I was in the room in 2010 when, you know, people said the lights are going to go out in 2018 and 2019, and now we have 33% reserves. So, you know, we're super successful with managing our money. So the lights did not go out. But we will have a shortfall. So if we don't pass this or find other revenue, other ways to increase revenue, we're going to have to cut services. And last time we cut services, remember we had a fire station closed on Bay Farm. So how many people on Bay Farm don't want to have an ambulance or a fire station? So those are the type of things. We cut hours at City Hall. We cut library hours. We cut park services. We cut police services. Those are the type of things I just don't want to cut. So I think this is an important measure for our city to help, you know, be able to pay our bills over the course of the next few years.
So my answer is that I don't support the half-cent sales tax. While I'm not advocating a no position. The reason for that is because we have no long-term strategic financial plan for the city. And that probably comes as a surprise to some people. 10 years ago, a group of people got together and put together what is called the Fiscal Sustainability Committee that put together a report. It did a very good job of outlining all of the long-term financial concerns and impacts, and basically put together a pretty bleak outlook for our 30-year finances. Things have gotten even more difficult with changes to CalPERS and whatnot in those times. And yet, that report made no recommendations on what we should do. So I believe before we go out and ask people to raise the sales tax, and before we take the risk of the impact to some of our businesses, et cetera, that it's really incumbent upon the city and the city council to put together a plan that shows you know, how does a new sales tax and how does this increased revenue play into a broader conversation about service cuts, about contract negotiations, and about possible raised revenue. The consequences of not passing it, I think Councilmember Odie has done a fine job of outlining that. There is no doubt we need the money. That's why I'm not opposing it. If I'm lucky to be elected, I will be happy that we have it. But at this point in time, I think it's time for our city council to get down and start actually tackling the tough issues that every 2 years during these things, everybody says that they are interested in tackling. And I do want to point out, since I have a couple seconds, I think the current council has made some really good short-term decisions. They've put up some policies for saving money that have gotten us to the reserves. I'm not saying that they have not taken action, but I don't know how we measure our success if we don't have a plan.
Well, actually, I'm glad that the cat was out of the bag. $4.7 million. That's our deficit in 2 to 3 years. I'm glad the city released that data. It's a wake-up call. People, we need, if you run this business like a private entity, we need to balance our revenue, our expense. And no, I'm not supporting Measure F. I think it's silly. Going back to the citizen for tax, we will be pushing 10%. 10%. Oakland's just a tube away. San Leandro is just, what, 2 minutes from Harbor Bay. We will lose revenue. People will just go shop somewhere else. We don't really have a solid commercial district in Alameda, and to push 10% sales tax, that's not going to work. I believe in raising sales tax revenue. Yeah, we lost the car dealership. Run Good Toyota and the other 2 dealerships in town. Those were our big ticket sales tax item. Sales tax is 10% of our general fund budget. Find ways to increase the revenue, not to tax the citizen again and again. We do this, you bail the city out, thank you, ma'am. What's next? 10 years from now, 5 years from now, another sales tax increase? We cannot keep taxing the citizens, not the residents, not the visitors. Tighten our belt. When I left the city council in 2014, John Russo, Team Russo, we were able to have $1 million surplus. If we can do it then, we can do it again.
This is an important question because many of you here are progressives, maybe Democratic progressives, or maybe even Republican progressives. And you care about issues of equity. And the problem with a sales tax is it is by its very nature regressive, that the people who can least afford it are hit the hardest by a sales tax. And that's going to happen here in Alameda, especially to the residents of the West End. So that's one of the reasons why I do not support the sales tax. The second reason I do not support the sales tax is because the reason for the sales tax in the first place, as Liz Warmerdam has stated, was because our pension obligations were driving us into the fiscal situation, thus requiring us to go after this sales tax. So think about it. As Kevin Kennedy and Kevin Kearney said, what you have is a sales tax that hurts the least among us the most in an effort to help pay for the people who are paid the highest in the city of Alameda. For those of you who are here who are progressives, that's something that you should be really concerned about. Now think about it too. We just recently opened the Target anchored shopping center with a lot of other wonderful retail and restaurants there generating sales taxes. We just recently opened that, and you're telling me now you need another another sales tax rate increase? There's something wrong here, folks. So we need to work with Kevin Kennedy and Kevin Kearney in scrubbing the data so that we can put together a plan that gets us out of this fiscal quagmire. And I'm happy to say that they endorsed me for city council. Thank you.
No, I am not for the raise in the sales tax. Usually before you do these things, you tighten your belt first. You go through department by department, you cut the fat, you get as lean as you can possibly get, and if you're at the point where it's still not working, then you go to this type of a measure. I didn't see any of that happening before the decision was made to put this on the ballot. And for that reason, I oppose it. I disagree that the first thing that you're going to see is a cut in services. We have reserves, which has been mentioned, so we're going to have to start spending the reserves. I think that is a likely thing that we'll see. We also have many different funds within our budget, and we fund long-term projects. So I would imagine another consequence would be we're going to stop funding long-term projects. Could actually be a good thing, because maybe what it would do is focus us and prioritize spending on things that can actually help raise revenue. The Greater Alameda Business Association has had an idea for a free shuttle, and if you go through the Alameda Economic Strategic Development Plan, they say our businesses are suffering because when people get here from San Francisco, we don't have adequate shuttles or public transportation to get them to our shopping districts so they can spend more money. Shuttles are just a couple $1 million, and they can be easily funded, and they're viable, and they can help us raise revenue. It might be a good thing. It might focus us on spending that helps business and helps us raise revenue rather than continuing to kick the can down the road.
What are your short and long-term priorities to reduce traffic, not just at the 5 major access points, but also across town?
So last fall, the City Council voted, I believe 4-1, for the Transportation Choices Plan, which was a plan that was put together by the Planning Board and the Transportation Commission and city staff through a number of meetings that really identifies what I would say is at least the short-term options. We need to be working right now to increase our bus service. Our buses are full as they leave the town, whether you're going to downtown Oakland or downtown San Francisco. People are standing and packed into buses as they get off the island. We will be in the next 16 months opening up a new ferry terminal with new ferry service. So supporting that and making sure that it is served by transit when it opens. We need to be doing what we can especially for internal circulation. We need to make our streets safer. The number one reason people choose not to bike and walk in our city is because they feel unsafe doing so. Not everybody can bike and walk. Nobody suggests that they can, but if we could move a significant portion of people who would be interested in doing so and letting their children do so and letting their children go to school to do so, we could very quickly take care of a lot of the inner Alameda transportation needs. Long term, well, I would say that we need to continue the work that we've been doing on our cross-estuary shuttles, whether those be water or buses. But long term, we need to start working now on ambitious projects, including a bike walk bridge over the estuary on the west end, looking at the transit tube that is currently under discussion for the west end, and really looking at how we can get people out of their cars because there's nowhere to go if you're driving. The parking lots in Oakland are disappearing. Nobody wants to drive to San Francisco. We need options. We don't need more expensive car infrastructure. Thank you.
You want the real answer, or you want me to lie to you? There's no easy solution. When people tell you we're going to solve a traffic solution, a traffic problem, mitigate a problem, it's a lie. The best that we can hope for is to keep it the same. Population's going to grow. People's going to have cars. We need to find a way to shuttle people in and out of Alameda. 70% of our commuters go to Oakland and San Francisco. Find a way to shuttle them to the BART station, to the ferry terminal. Increase bus line, more bus lines, I don't know. There's a lot of things that we can do, but to stop and to solve the traffic problem, that's dreaming. Never gonna happen. It's a regional problem. I wish I have a magic solution and a magic wand to say, here, solve. It's going to be a tough battle to solve the problem, but we should not stop trying. I love the estuary crossing. I take that once or twice a month. I used to commute from Oakland, from Alameda to Oakland. It takes me 7 minutes. Now it's 21 minutes. So I took the estuary crossing at least twice, sometimes 3 times a month. I see it, I love it. Shuttle people to the BART station. Expand, not discontinue. Expand the estuary crossing to shuttle people to the BART station, to the ferry terminal, to heck, the bus hubs. Now we have a loop shuttle. How many of you have taken a loop? It's so confusing. It's different schedule every week. I haven't taken it because I'm still confused. Bring back the estuary crossing. Expand it.
My background is in urban planning with a master's in city and regional planning from Cal. And as a result, I believe that we can solve any problem that's put in front of us. At the end of the day, we are, all of us, Americans, not Americans. So we will solve the traffic congestion problem in the city of Alameda, and this is how Tony Daysog, if elected to the city council, will tackle the issue. Addressing the short-term issues first on the service aspect. In terms of services, the first thing I look at is the low-hanging fruit of carpooling. What we need to do is incentivize people with electric vehicles especially to get them more and more to carpool, whether they're going to San Francisco or Bishop Ranch in San Ramon or Walnut Creek where I live. And we, the city of Alameda, we have assets called city parks and another asset called the electric company where we can put together a program that puts chargers out there and prioritizes people with electric vehicles who make a commitment to carpool. Another service orientation that I would focus on, a low-hanging fruit, would be coordinating existing shuttles. We have 2 or 3 existing shuttles right now. One coming out of Marina Village in the morning, another coming out of the Target, part of the Target project. And what we need to make sure to do is better coordinate these shuttles so that, if one person misses one shuttle, the other shuttle is going to be readily available. In terms of infrastructure, in the low-hanging fruit, I definitely want to look at ways to change the inbound lane on the Park Street Bridge into an outbound lane during the morning peak commute hours so that we have 3 lanes flowing out and to encourage traffic flow over the Park Street Bridge. It looks like it could be done engineering-wise and safe. The long-term solutions I said we look at has to do with Site A. We need to get that going because the project developer there has 3 great ideas with regard to transit and traffic planning.
Speaking of low-hanging fruit, if you go over Park Street and that, how it's really backing up now, they changed that light right down at the end. And that light was supposed to be an on-demand. If you're a pedestrian and you need to cross, you know, you press it and it stops. It was not meant to be a timed light. Now it's a timed light, and almost as soon as that change happened, I saw the traffic coming back and back and back. So the first thing I'd like to do is get out there and see if we change that to an on-demand thing. How much of an impact is that going to have on traffic getting off the island? I'm not a transportation expert, but I think it's going to have a huge impact on that. There's another timing issue that we have over by Home Depot. Have you ever been caught by Home Depot over by that High Street car wash? And there's a big tractor trailer there, which they go over by Home Depot. That light is timed wrong. You get one tractor trailer through the whole thing, and you jam that up. So in terms of simple things that we can do, I think those are things that we need to explore. I've been big on shuttles and getting shuttles out to the main ferry terminal and all our ferry terminals. When I was a first-year lawyer, I would take a shuttle from my place over on Shoreline Drive. I'd go out to the ferry terminal. I'd go across the water, walk to Embarcadero 2. Oh, I can't stay all night. My 8 o'clock, the water for the shuttle is leaving. Those are the short term. The water shuttle, water taxi, I've been a big proponent on that. It's viable, it's doable, it's not permanent. Put some bike racks on it. That long-term projects are all the BART tubes, estuary tubes. Those things are going to happen, if at all, way down the line, and with only after a lot of funding, and we need the funding from the state.
So thank you for that question. I think one of my colleagues up here mentioned the Transportation Choices Plan, and just to give a kudo to my former colleague, Mr. Desog, that was, the genesis of that was a referral that he brought before council, and that passed 4-1, and that resulted in this Transportation Choices Plan. And if you were there on Monday when we had our forum with the business associations, my colleague Frank Mataresi said, we have the ideas, we have the priorities, we just have to do as a council, make sure that our staff implements them. So that's critical. You know, we have all of these choices out there, we have these options to reduce traffic, and we have to make sure as a council we prioritize them. So some things I'll prioritize. First, as an overarching goal, we have to get people out of single occupancy vehicles. So it shouldn't really matter whether there's a light here or a light there, or whether there's traffic in Oakland. Well, not only for traffic's sake, but for the environment's sake, we have to get people out of single occupancy vehicles. And we've done that. We're expanding ferry system. In 18 months, we'll have a 3rd ferry station. I think we're underutilizing our biggest asset in Alameda for transit, and that's the water with our ferry system. We brought back Line 19. Councilmember Desog was on the council and voted for that as well. And what we did this year, or last year, I can't remember exactly which year, but in this current council, is we made sure we funded 20-minute times and during rush hour. We were going to lose that and go back to half hour, and we as a council said, no, we want to make sure we have 20 minutes. The shuttle, I think, is important. Our council put that forward. We wanted to do that. There are grant funds that we can get from different transit agencies in the state and the federal government to fund that. We need safe, protected bike lanes. You know, the BRT is coming to Alameda Point. Water taxi, that's part of some of our development agreements that we've agreed to, and also pre-bus passes. In long term, we do need a clean tube with either electric buses, electric vehicles, and bicycles, and also the BART, but I don't know if I'll be alive when that happens.
Mr. Chen, you'll get us started with our 4th and final question of this first round, and after our break, we'll resume with 5 more questions to close our evening. This is the question. What are your thoughts on public financing of local elections in Alameda? Is this a good idea or not? And why or why not?
Public financing, campaign contributions. I will support, I mean, look at other cities. Oakland has a cap. I think it's $700 or $800. Alameda, we don't. I mean, if we want to put a cap, I don't think you will find one of us out here that says no. Level the playing field? Sure, as long as we all play by the rules. I have practice in Oakland. I commute to work every morning. And I guess 60 or 70% of my campaign financing comes from outside the island. And it just, the way people spin it, oh my God, Stewart's campaign contributions are from outside the island. I got patients in their 70s and 80s giving me $35, $50. Do you think they have a special interest in Alameda? Heck no. My mom, I have two sisters in Fremont, one in Oakland, one in Hayward. They give me money. It doesn't mean they have a special interest in Alameda. All this special interest go from outside Alameda. If we are gonna restrict money only in Alameda, sure, I will play by the rule. Everybody should play by the rule. We want to change the campaign financing law, that's fine. I think we all will agree as long as we, as a group, decide on what kind, what the cap is, who we can accept money to. I'm all for it. Campaign financing reform, sure, bring it on. As long as we all play by the same rules.
Well, you know, when you look at your charts, I'm practically 100% Alameda funded. I can't promise that that's going to be the case after the reporting, but so far, you know, we're still holding on to that. But if a check happens to come from outside, hey, we're more than happy to accept it. Because at the end of the day, as your data indicates, I run a very low budget campaign. You know, so far I'm coming in at the lowest. So for that reason, I'm definitely all for public financing of campaigns. But all humor aside, I'm also in favor for public financing of campaigns because the health of our city needs it. You know what happened in 2010 to Frank Mataresi when he ran for mayor, and frankly what happened to me in 2016 when I ran for city council. You know, incredible loads of money from developers, from the local fire union, that went to independent expenditures that generated the most outrageous political pamphlets that, you know, convinced people who were new to Alameda mostly and didn't know who Tony Desog was, that I was a Republican. I'm not. I'm a moderate Democrat. And so what happened to me, I think in 2016, or what happened to Frank in 2010, tells me that we're at a time now where we need to figure out how to do publicly financed campaigns. And I would love, if I get on city council, to work with the mayor and our city council members in generating some kind of blue ribbon commission to help us figure out how to do public financing here in the city of Alameda, because our health requires it.
I'm the new guy and I'm not well funded, so of course anything that would help level the playing field, but I seem to be doing okay just on the budget that I have. And when I looked at the budgets, if you look at the on-island and the off-island, we're all pretty much equal. The contribution caps and the caps on the spending, look, you put some yard signs up, you do some door hangers, put up a website, Facebook. I paid to have my materials translated into Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Korean, Spanish to do better outreach in those communities. We have our local communities, League of Women Voters being one of them, that have these great candidate forums where the word can get out. I didn't pay to show up here tonight and have access to a lot of voters, and I'm sure you're going to go home and you might talk to a friend or two about that. So I think especially in our local elections, a contribution or a spending cap would make eminent sense, and I don't think that we need all that money, and I think there are big problems when you get big money, big problems.
So I think the question was about public financing of local elections. You know, these elections are not cheap. You know, it's not inexpensive to run a campaign. And probably the thing I enjoy the least about running for office is having to dial for dollars. You know, I love the door knocking, I love the forums, You know, I love talking to people, and you know, I actually don't mind being recognized over at FedEx and having somebody ask me a question. But the fundraising I don't like. So, you know, thankfully it's all public and it's all transparent. So if you see somebody that's supported by working men and women like I am, who stands up for their values, whether it's, you know, one job should be enough, whether it's helping our low-wage workers, you know, make more money, whether it's everyone has health care, whether it's health care for all, whether it's standing up for our immigrants, you should know that. And you should know that when a labor union gives a check for $500, it's really made up of a bunch of $10 and $15 contributions that their workers have been giving, workers that live in Alameda, whether the union is in Alameda or not, over the course of the past year. You know, and if you see somebody that's getting a contribution from a landlord and, you know, the property owner oligarchy, and they're supporting measures that hurt our tenants, you got to look at that too. So, but as far as, you know, public financing, who's going to pay for that? That's going to be all of you. That's going to be all of us. So there's 8 candidates running. Just hypothetically, we each qualify for $40,000 in public financing, $320,000. So would you rather trade giving taxpayer money to us, politicians, or 3 cops? Would you rather give money to us, politicians, or keep the library open an extra afternoon? Would you rather give money to us, politicians, or be able to finish Gene Sweeney Park so we can all enjoy that crown jewel in the center of Alameda? So those are the choices. It may sound like a great idea and very noble, but when it comes down to it, if this is something that the community wants to do, it's going to be choices, and we're going to have to figure out what those choices are. Do you want to raise sales tax to fund that, or do you not?
So when I was on the the Sunshine Task Force, one of the things that we were asked by the City Council to look at was financing and how we might put campaign finance regulations into place. And we actually ended up making a recommendation to the City Council that was sent to the Council. The Council received it. They sent it to the City Attorney's Office for review, and it disappeared forever. I think this is a very complicated issue. You know, I am interested in having this conversation and seeing if our city is interested in paying $320,000, probably more, because once you start publicly financing, you're going to have people who previously wouldn't have run, who now will. So let's call it $500,000. I think we should have that conversation. But I think we need to be very open with ourselves about the fact that it's not going to stop big money from coming into the elections. And that's the problem that we run into with Citizens United and tax code and everything else. If when you cap money in one place, it shows up in the independent expenditure accounts, the PACs. We have 3 of them right now. We have one that has spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars this year. Yes, on K. Corporations are putting hundreds of thousands of dollars to convince you that they're doing something for renters. The caps, the public financing, it's not going to change any of that, right? So I think what we need to have a conversation about is what are we trying to achieve? I do, as somebody, I have nearly 280 individual donations right now. So when you see my bar, that's a lot of people giving me $100, $75, $150. That's been an incredible amount of work. Berkeley matches every contribution up to $35 3 times. So if somebody gives you 35, you get 150 or so from the city, essentially. More later.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your participation in this forum and for your willingness to run for this important office. We'll start with Mr. Desog on this round of questions, and the first one is a doozy, so I hope you're up on your shorthand skills. I'll read it as it's written here. Here is the question. The attorney, I'll start again. The attorney contracted to investigate claims of charter violations stated in his report, the right to hold public office, either by election or appointment, is one of the valuable rights of citizenship. The exercise of this right should not be declared prohibited or curtailed except by plain provision of law. That's a quote. What steps will you take, if elected to the City Council, to ensure that the charter provision for, quote, removal from office for malfeasance, unquote, is clarified and policies regarding implementation are considered by the City Council? Do you want it one more time, anybody?
Please.
Thanks, one more time.
The attorney contracted to investigate claims of charter violations stated in his report, quote, "The right to hold public office, either by election or appointment, is one of the valuable rights of citizenship. The exercise of this right should not be declared prohibited or curtailed except by plain provision of law," unquote. What steps will you take, if elected to the City Council, to ensure that the charter provision for, quote, "removal from office for malfeasance," unquote, is clarified and policies regarding implementation are considered by the City Council?
If elected to the City Council, I will seek to clarify the charter provision that says that in the event a council member gets involved, tries to influence the city manager when it comes to hiring, that council member will have to be removed. The clarification I will seek is the process and the timeline by which the literal wording of the city charter is maintained. Because right now, there's just a city charter line that says, if you cross the line, you will lose your job. But there's no follow-up procedures, and we need to clarify that. The clarification I will not seek is to weaken what's in the city charter. And again, the reason why our city charter has a literal, bright, clear line as to what constitutes incorrect behavior when it comes to a council member trying to influence a city manager when it comes to hiring. The reason why the city charter is so, clear as to what happened to that council member is for the historic reasons that happened here in the city of Alameda in the 1930s, and because it strikes at the very heart of our city manager form of government that came out of the progressive movement, is to make sure that we have laws and practices in place that allow, that prevent unions from pressuring city managers or everyone else to achieve their ends. So I will, if elected, try to clarify that, but in an effort to keep the language as it is.
I believed it was a pretty bright line rule. It didn't seem ambiguous to me. I'm an attorney. I believe in due process, and that is the only thing that is missing from that charter provision is some form of due process after a finding has been made and to get to a finding. I disagreed with the independent investigator's report where he weighed in on whether or not it was a good rule or a good thing to have. I completely disagreed with that. That was outside of his role as an investigator. You have the language of the rule, you apply those words, and I believe that applying those words is fairly evident. We had the chief of police who said that a threat was made, I have the votes to fire you if you don't go my way. I believe the chief of police is a fairly credible and trustful witness. And again, independent investigator kind of glossed over. We had other elected officials at the state level who just said, I don't want to play. I don't want to testify. I'm unwilling to answer questions. All of that is completely unacceptable. So yes, I am all for clarifying the due process that would need to happen in the event of a charter violation to ensure that somebody is not unfairly trapped, but I believe that the language is fairly straightforward. I know as a lawyer, everything's a shade of gray, but it didn't seem like that to me.
So interesting question. The investigator did suggest that we take a look at that charter section. And so that's what our council is going to do. I think we have an agenda item coming up in November or December to take a look at it. I mean, interestingly enough, almost an exact same charter has been held to be unconstitutional as a violation of the First Amendment. So you put that on one side. Then on the second side, as far as a process, there is a process, and the process is spelled out in state law. So state law governs if something is triggered by an alleged violation of that charter. So I encourage people to look at that process and find out what it is, because it's not something that the city council has control over. The city council cannot, for example, vote to get rid of the mayor because they have a political difference with her. That's not something that we have the right to do. The only people that can get rid of people is the voters. So, I mean, what I will say, getting back to the First Amendment, we have a right and we have a duty to advocate for you, our residents. And I will continue to advocate for those less fortunate. I will continue to advocate for those that are powerless. I will continue to advocate for your public safety, so your property values remain high, so our school system remains high. So if you are a victim of a crime, that crime is solved, or so you don't even become a victim of a crime at all. If you have a stroke, the ambulance gets there in 5 minutes instead of 15, which makes a difference between life and death. And that is not only our solemn obligation, that is our solemn duty as a council member to advocate for all of you, our residents, to have the best paid place to live in the world.
Assuming the city council does not take this up and finish their work before the new council is sworn in, if I'm lucky enough to be on the council at that time, I think that the way to approach this would be the way that I approach a lot of complicated issues. And this is going to be obviously a very big and emotional issue. We can hear it here tonight. I think that we need to sit down and figure out how to engage the community in this conversation, because at the end of the day, if we're going to change the charter, we're going to have to ask everybody to vote. And that vote is probably not going to come in 6 months. It'll probably come in a couple of years, so we have some time, unless we decide that it's important enough for us to make this change and and pay for a special election, which will cost us $700,000 or $800,000. So that gives us time to hold a meeting to identify what, kind of make sure the community is on board with what we're trying to do. What are the goals and outcomes that we're trying to do? What are the options? Councilmember Odie has cited some case law that he feels makes the existing language complicated. I think we have a city attorney who can actually give our community some, even though they work for the city council, they can actually provide some legal advice to the community that can help the community inform how they'd like to move forward. And then I think from that point in time, in reading the independent investigators report, which I haven't done in a while, so hopefully I'm remembering it correctly, but I do think there was quite a bit of discussion about kind of technical violations and whether they rise to criminal malfeasance or not, which is what our charter starts to call that, and the problems within. And I think that's a conversation this community should have, is that is writing a letter of recommendation rising to that level, which is the violation that was found. But at the end of the day, I think we need to have some community forums, and they need to be well designed to take community input, to hear from people, to let people have a say, and then to use our professional staff to help guide the input with kind of neutral facts that can inform a final recommendation that we can put before the voters.
Well, Jenkins' report, I mean, most of you have read it in its entirety or in parts. It's been discussed, dissected, and talked about in dinner table, social media, group meetings. You guys already made up your mind on what happened. City Council is policy-making body. It sets the policy direction for staff to follow. Staff are hired professionals who run the city, day-to-day operation. And we also have another body, the advisory councils. The board, commissions, we have an open government commission. If this issue is not addressed by the time one of us get elected to city council, I think the first thing we should do is bring it up, talk to the open government commission, hear from the community, hear from the staff, and come up with a recommendation. If we do come up with an amendment, a charter amendment, ultimately has to go back to you. The citizens will have to vote on it. So, as far as I'm concerned, the report is out, we read it, we move on.
Mr. Matz, you're up first on this one. This is probably a less lengthy question, but every bit as complicated. So, here's the question. Please tell us about your position on cannabis. What do you think about the city's current ordinance? Where are you on the overall issue? And please be as specific as possible given the time constraint.
Well, it is state law, and it is not lawful under federal law. I practice in the federal courts, and the federal courts have not yet, and federal law has not yet recognized it. Under California state law, however, it is lawful, it is legal, and we are on our way of implementing that. We have a cannabis referral coming up on Tuesday to open up additional retail and delivery spaces. And in addition, we have medical parts that have been also open. So my view on the cannabis issue is that this is an issue of state law. State law requires that we can place reasonable restrictions on it, but we cannot place restrictions that are so onerous as to amount to a prevention. Earlier parts of the law were highly restrictive, and probably the only place you could legally dispense was standing on a rock out on the bay, over on the corner. So those have been, that has been addressed, that has been moved, that's been opened up, and I think that we're moving in the right direction. And that direction is that it is state law, we need to honor that. We are allowed to do reasonable restrictions on that. We cannot place restrictions that would prevent it from happening within the city limits.
So medicinal cannabis was legalized in California, what, 1996? And adult use, I think 2/3 of Alameda voters back in 2016 agreed with the proposition that adult use should be permitted also. And if you ever knock on doors and walk precincts on a Friday night, you'll know that adult use is already there in Alameda. I think this is one of the things that, you know, we've had to move our professional staff as a policy board on the council. I think the mayor has been a strong leader in this, Councilmember Vela, myself, we tried to push for this, with also protecting. So I voted for,
I'll just talk. I voted for the current situation that we have with our proposal where we have 2 dispensaries. I'd like to see that go to 4 because we are a city that by population could afford 5 as far as our population. I think we should get into manufacturing, and we have allowed for permits on that, but nobody has applied for that because the tax situation is unsettled. I think we should also allow adult use dispensaries. We're having an agenda item next week, as Robert said, to talk about delivery options. I think we need to have delivery options because these people are coming into Alameda from out of Alameda, and we should be able to make money off of that, or at least know who's doing it so they can register. I agree with the buffer zone around schools. We put a 1,000-foot buffer zone around schools. We've kind of compacted that to 600 around other sensitive uses because that's what the state allowed. So as far as specificity, you know what I voted for. I think we need to continue moving forward and provide not only compassionate use for patients who need it, but allow adult use and support the 2/3 of Alamedans who voted for it.
Thank goodness I'm not that loud. So I'll take a step back. Right as cannabis was heading towards legalization, state law was changed that basically said cities need to pass some regulations, or state regulations will be the law of the day. A very rushed staff report was brought to the planning board. We had to decide tonight so we could get something to the council so they could pass it in time to get our laws on the books before the state law took effect. The recommendation was, and we approved it, to ban everything at that time, simply because we didn't have the time to actually have a really nuanced conversation. Staff had done no work, etc. You know, my solution, which I asked my colleagues to support me on, and which they did, was to pass the ban, but also send a message to the city council at that time that it was time to start this conversation so that we were not behind the 8 ball, so that from the manufacturing research and the business end of this, we could actually possibly be a community that was reaping benefits and out ahead of other communities. Councilmember Odie was very supportive of that, but unfortunately there were not any other votes. The other 4 people on the council said no, and it sat for a few years. And then again, we ended up with a very rushed process when it finally did come back. which cut a lot of people out. The school community was not included in that conversation. So, I think we're in a very constrained place right now. I think we do need to. My understanding of this issue is evolving. I am understanding that medical only places are just not going to survive. Nobody can open one because adult use is so prevalent. People are just not even getting medical cards anymore. You might as well just go to a place where you can buy it without one. So we do need to do that. Whether it's 3 or 4, I definitely agree that we need to be slow and make sure we're not overpopulating. But right now, I think we're at the very slow end.
Back in 1980, I remember I was 18 years old, with college, starting freshman year in college, and I came from a very conservative family background, Roman Catholic, immigrant from the Philippines. So I came home with a joint. My sister saw it, immediately grabbed it from me and said, "You cannot do this. You will be addicted for life." Flash it down the toilet. That's my family background. I mean, cannabis, never tried it in my life. I don't think I ever will. I voted no in Prop 64 when it came up. I mean, we talked about it. Wife and I were on board, said, "No way, Jose. Recreational cannabis, I'm having a problem with medical cannabis." But my 2 kids said, "Dad," they voted yes. So there's that gap. Yes, I will never try cannabis in the near or foreseeable future. But guys, it's the law. California is legal. Recreational cannabis is legal. As your council member, as your policy maker, we gotta abide by the law. And 70% of you said yes to recreational cannabis. I come from a healthcare background, so I gotta change with time. And if that's what the citizens want, then we need to regulate it. Either 1,000 feet, 500 feet, 2 dispensaries in the cultivation grow, or is it 4? My concern is make sure the products that we are going to be eventually selling are safe. It's research, it's regulated, and it's taxed. But yeah, it's the law. I will abide by it, and I don't want to see big corporation coming in and monopolizing it. I want to encourage more local business owners, maybe expand it to 3 or even 4.
Like many of, before I begin, let me just take 10 seconds to say, at the outset of this evening, I believe I might have mistakenly said that I live in Walnut Creek. To all of you, I work in Walnut Creek and live in Alameda. To the television, I work in Walnut Creek and I live in Alameda. 10 seconds. Like many of you, I am concerned about, the effects of stimulants like marijuana or even alcohol on our minds. But I think when it comes to marijuana, especially medical marijuana, the science is really in, and the science demonstrates that there is medicinal benefits. There are values to having medical marijuana and to having that kind of establishment, even in Alameda. Now, I will have a kind of unique take to this whole discussion because there is actually a very strong prospect that medical marijuana or a medical marijuana dispensary facility will open 2 doors from my house. So my house, as you know, is on, it's at the farmer's market, so I'm two houses from the intersection of Haight and Webster. So it's all completely possible that the store on the corner will become a medical marijuana site. So as a council member, while I could not officially take part in the matter, should it come to pass, that one in particular, as a resident of Alameda, I can be involved, and you know darn well that I'm going to make sure that they are good neighbors, not just in my neighborhood because so much is at stake for me, but in any neighborhood in Alameda. My understanding of our ordinance is that it seems to be fairly strong, I believe some of the medical marijuana outlets interested in Alameda would like to see it weakened. I'm not ready yet to weaken the law, but I do believe that the science is in, that there is a benefit to having it, and we need to make sure that we have good laws to make them good neighbors.
What do you see as the city's role in planning for the potential rise in sea level? Should the city commit money to the planning process now?
Okay, well, the city has a big role in that. Just to give you the high-level overview, we in fact just last year amended our general plan to account for sea level rise. We put in a lot of different checks, including that all new development has to be built to withstand 24 inches of sea level rise and a 100-year flood. So that's something we're already doing. Another thing we're doing, Councilmember Mataresi did a referral to move up this process, and I applaud him for doing that, was supportive of it, is to have our climate action plan started a couple years early than we planned to revise it because it was outdated and needed to be revised. So we're doing that right now, thanks to the community having a lot of input. So we'll see what specific plans come out of there, and just like the Transit Choices Plan, we have to make sure as a council we prioritize implementing these solutions. The other thing I think we can do, and it's even a little bit more immediate term, is there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be dealt with, dealing with sea level rise, pumps, lagoons, water stations, things like that. So I would like to see, we had a discussion about an infrastructure bond, and we have 300 million in unmet infrastructure needs. 100 million of it, or 110 million, would take care of sea level rise. Well, the proposal that came from staff was to do 100 million total, which is a third, and then sea level rise would get a third of that. Well, for 30 million, we're not going to fix anything, to be quite honest with you, when we have 110 million of need. And if you drove down Shoreline last winter when we had all those heavy rains, you know we need to fix this now. So what I'd like to see us do is a dedicated infrastructure bond just for that water infrastructure and flood infrastructure to make sure we take care of sea level rise.
So up until about 3.5 years ago or so, the city's official policy on sea level rise was that it was really difficult and the region and the state would save us, but it's not something a local agency or a local city could do anything about. They wrote that in the capital improvement plan. When I was on the planning board, that document came to me, and actually before it even came to the meeting, I called the new public works director and I said, you know, what is this? And he said, this is the policy of our former public works director. And we talked about how in a city that is an island with a peninsula, this is just ridiculous. We need to be leaders. We need to be at the table. We need to be identifying our needs so that we can be fighting for everything, or we're going to be left behind. Luckily, he said, you know what, you're right. And he actually rewrote that section of the document, changed the policy right there. And by the time it got to the planning board, sea level rise was on the table for our city as something. Moving forward, Frank Mataresi, working with CASA and many other community leaders in the environmental movement, moved this forward, and we do now have a sea level rise adaptation plan that's under development. So what is our role? First, we need to identify and talk to the community about what are all the impacts, because this is going to be very expensive. We are going to have to pay for it, and likely there are going to be costs that the state is not going to give us. The state and the region are going to work to save the airport. They're going to work to save 880, and we are an island that doesn't connect to either of those. Bay Farm's great. You guys are going to get, folks from Bay Farm, you're likely going to be behind whatever dike is built. The island, we got to figure that out, because building a dike across to an island makes us no longer an island. It's going to be expensive, and it's a big conversation, and we need to start looking at what are those options, what are our needs, what are the options, what's it going to cost, and how are we going to start long-term funding that. And starting as soon as possible.
So, 3 days ago, I heard it on NPR. I listen to NPR every day going to work. Half a degree Celsius will cause, rise in temperature will cause not just sea level rise, but increased natural disaster. 18 inches in 50 years is what I hear, and I've also heard 24 inches by 2045. But what about natural disasters? We need to be able to be resilient enough to be able to maintain the peace and order if it happens, to transport us out of Alameda if we need to, get to our seniors, get to our disabled, We live on an island, for crying out loud. And we know the risk of living on an island. But knowing all the risks, I know 99.9% of you will not move out of Alameda because we love Alameda. That's how passionate we are about our island city. As far as sea level rise, no easy fix. We can talk about wetland, plant more trees, de-pave the roads, or seawall. But these are all band-aids. It costs a lot, but I think the other solution or the other equation to this problem is smart building. Don't build along the seashores. Build on a higher clearance. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do. The temperature keeps rising. The icebergs are melting. The sea level is going to rise. We need to find a solution that we can all live with. And don't forget, hopefully I'm wrong, but I think we will face a natural disaster before the sea level rise become even an issue. We're going out 18 inches in the next 50 years. That's a few inches the next 5 to 10 years. But I'm afraid of the fault line and the natural disaster. It's going to happen soon.
Sea level rise poses an existential threat to Alameda in ways that perhaps it doesn't pose to maybe Modesto, California, or St. Helena, California. So for that reason, we, as a council and as a city, we need to act now. But in moving forward, keep this in mind. Don't panic, let's plan. Let's plan now so that generations from today, that your grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren living in Alameda know that the council that was put into place in 2018 put in policies that help them to deal with sea level rise. So let me talk about one policy that I would pursue. One policy that I would pursue is to make sure that we have a line item within our reserve policy that designates some of the reserve towards dealing with climate action, sea level rise. Because we as a city, if not, we need to do something like that. Right now, the city of Alameda unfortunately has a $50 million reserve. Now, our budget is roughly $90 million or so. So a $50 million reserve is pretty good. And of the $50 million reserve, about $28 million is not slotted for anything. So we have wiggle room now to begin to sock away funds so that, whatever strategies that we pursue, that John or Jim or whomever, if they get on council and I don't, or if I pursue, that whatever strategies that we have the resources to implement them. So that's the one thing I'm going to do, is create a reserve policy to make sure now so that we can begin socking away money, because it does pose an existential threat to all of us.
We need to do our part. And I can just tell a story, and we are getting better. My dad was on the Yorktown, a sister ship of the Hornet, and used to hang out with the guys that would clean the parts. What they do is they degrease them, and they'd have all the degreaser there, and they'd roll it around, and they'd take the parts out, and they'd dump it, and it would go right into a drain or directly into the bay. We don't do that anymore. And so we have improved. Alameda, we've adopted zero waste policies. We're doing the best that we can. I think we can do more, but we can do more to implement a greener Alameda. I think that everybody in this room knows that we are moving in that direction. With respect to what we can do on sea level rise and some of the larger issues, we have a climate action plan. We are taking action there too. And that's a low-cost thing that we can do. We are engaging the community, we're engaging people that know more about this issue, and we are getting that input. We have an infrastructure plan. One of our big problems or contributors is our storm drain system. I had a CASA debate, and I learned all about our storm drain system. I could bore you to tears on storm drains. It's a big problem. Every time it rains, we are polluting the bay, and that is the thing. But it's provided for in the capital improvement budget. So there are things that we can do. So to summarize, we need to do what we need to do, but we are in fiscal crisis. The roof is leaking, we have a tarp over it, and we cannot afford to start spending large sums of money for long-term projects. We need to focus our spending and prioritize it on things that we can do and that are feasible.
All right, Mr. Knox-White, step up to the plate for our final question, please, and start us out. Here is the question. What personal and professional qualities do you think are most important to the achievement of effective service on the Alameda City Council?
So I think, personal, I think first and foremost is integrity. I think somebody who can consider, really can consider the issues, and for me, somebody who can really look strategically. This is a policy body. This is not somebody who needs to crack the whip over every single city staffer, who needs to get involved in everything that, that the Public Works Department is doing, etc. City manager's job is to do that. I think what I learned on the Transportation Commission, and then actually I think put into practice on the Planning Board, really was the importance of having outcomes, and then putting together plans and strategies that can actually be put into practice by doing that. Professionally, I think having a good wide range of professional experience is good. I'm a transportation planner. Transportation, as I've knocked on about 2,500 doors so far since March. I can guarantee you transportation is the #1 issue and housing costs #2 in this city. I think having somebody who understands understands transportation, the funding sources, not necessarily, I'm not going to fund the projects, either personally or by writing grants. I'm not making that commitment tonight, at least. But understanding that, I think people who have a lot of experience in working with the public as well, talking to people, I think that's where working on boards and commissions really comes in handy. And showing some experience working within the system, so you understand the system. The system is complicated. It's not business. It's not running a small business. It's not running a law firm. It's not. It's its own thing, and understanding that is a very important experience.
2 minutes, but I'm here right out of time. So this is what I feel like a good council member should have: experience, respect, a good ear, and diversity. I'm going to start with diversity because I think I'm going to run out of time and not be able to talk about diversity. Diversity. Alameda has, the last 2010 census, 32% Asian Americans, 11% Hispanic, 6% African American, 52% white. But if you look at our appointed and elected officials, out of the 80, less than 10%. Is it a true reflection of our elected bodies? No, it's not. We need to be actively seeking, make sure that everyone is seated at the table, that we have a voice. Experience. And that's why we have the boards and commissions. You want to serve on the council? Kudos to Trish, not serving on any board and jump right in and became one of the best mayors that we have. But experience. We need you to serve on 1 or 2 boards or commissions. Learn to work with staff. Learn to listen to community members. Experience. Respect. When I was on the council, I remember, you'll be surprised, a little respect will go a long way. Our city manager offered a monthly meeting, and then the assistant city manager, Nguyen, said, Stuart, I want to do that too. They offered a little respect, respect the staff, respect the work that they do for us. I think we'll go a long way. And what's the last one? Good ear. Listen. Go to events, attend forums, talk to the community, shop local, talk to our residents. These are all qualities that will make a good council member. And all 5 of us here are pretty darn qualified.
Way back in 1996, when I ran for city council, I was 30 years old, and I sought the endorsement of former Mayor Chuck Carica, going to his house over there on Post Street. And he and Mrs. Carica sat me down, and his basic question was this. He said, hey, Tony, do Do you love the people of Alameda? That's the most important thing, is that do you love the people of Alameda? And I think that that's true, that you have to love the people of Alameda and all their stories and all the experience that they bring, and bring your love for the people to City Hall to make things better. You know, at the end of the day, you know, okay, so what? I have a master's in city planning from Cal, wow. Or I went there for undergrad. Or I work, you know, as a senior manager with an economic development consulting company in Walnut Creek. All that is good, but at the end of the day, if I'm not listening to the people, if I'm not engaging people at the farmer's market or the coffee shops, you know, what good is all that? Because loving the people means that you respect them enough to listen to them and try to use your strengths to figure out how to make life better for us and future generations. I do think I have the professional experience to ask the right questions, but as important, I think I respect my colleagues on council, and I respect the acumen of the city staff, because I know that when we work all together, that we can really grow the love of Alameda and make our city a better place for everyone.
I see it that you need to be kind of multiple roles in multiple ways. When we're dealing with a developer or a special interest, what you need and what I believe the city needs is a strong advocate. Somebody who will stand up for our citizens and stand up for our interests, and when they threaten to pull out of a deal, and when they say that if you don't give up this, if you don't untether the affordable housing, we're going to walk away and leave this deal, we need somebody with a backbone, we need somebody with a spine who will stand up and fight for this city. When we're talking about the city workers, you need somebody who can motivate people to do their very best and to get on a common goal. And I disagree. Working at law firms and working on a trial team, you are working within a team and you are trying to get everybody within that team to perform their very best and to do their very best for the client. And that is the city of Alameda, working with their city employees to do what's best for the city of Alameda. Within council relations, respect has to be the first one. Secondly, listening. We all have different experiences. I might not agree with John Knox White. I might not agree with Jim. But I need to be able to listen to them and know where they are coming from. I might need to let them know where I'm coming from. So I think we need that as well. In terms of the professional qualifications, sad to say, law is very important in the work of a council. Understanding the law, evaluating the law, understanding legal concepts, those things are very important. And separating out the wheat from the chaff, the right from the wrong, the sales pitch versus what is true. So I think that's important.
Thank you for that question. I think the first, I was going to answer part of this in my close, so now you gave me some more time. But I think one of the first things we all have to love Alameda, and I think you can tell by the responses here and the fact that you all know, all of us, that we all love Alameda. I think it's also important to look at your values. I mean, who are the people you are fighting for? Do you believe, like I do, that housing is a basic human right, period, end of sentence, stop? Or do you believe that people can be forced out of their housing without due process? Do you believe that everyone belongs here? Or do you believe that it's okay to throw a window through a synagogue? Or it's okay to discriminate against somebody because of their color of their skin? Do you believe we should fight wage inequality and raise the minimum wage? Or do you believe that it's okay for people to work 3 or 4 jobs in order to make ends meet? So I have strong progressive values. I'm proud of those progressive values, and I'm going to keep fighting for those progressive values. I think relationships are important. You know, in my day job, I work for our Assembly Member Rob Bonta. We have to collaborate with regional leaders. You heard all of us talk about traffic being a regional problem. We have to collaborate with the region and our state and our federal officials to try to get things done. Last thing, I think important to collaborate. And if you look at my record, I've been able to work with everyone on City Council. I work with Council Member Ashcraft on housing issues. I work with Frank Mataresi on issues related to public health and trying to ban flavored tobacco. I work with our mayor on cannabis issues. She was a leader on that, and I was proud to work with her on that. I work with Malia on a lot of these other issues about, divesting from Wells Fargo, because we shouldn't be spending our city money in places like that. I also work with our labor unions. We talked about the pension and the OPEB issue. I work with them, and now we have $22 million set aside that we didn't have 4 years ago. We have our public service employees giving 4% of their pay to pay for promises that we promised them in their OPEB. They give back 19%. So that means, can you imagine any job that you have where you pay someone $5 and you immediately give them $1 back? I think I've been able to collaborate with a lot of people and will continue to do that.
Thank you for those great answers. We will conclude the evening with 2-minute statements from each of the candidates, starting at the far end of the table this time and passing the microphone down this way. So please begin your statements at this time.
Well, thank you very much for coming out this evening. As the League of Women Voters and affiliates of the League of Women Voters, all of you believe in good government. And that is the crux of the issue facing the city of Alameda this November, is to make sure that we have a city council that's going to install a return of the city manager professional type of government. Because unfortunately, what we've been experiencing recently indicates that we're far short of that. We're not exactly Tammany Hall, but we're at a place where, in effect, the unions, the fire unions, can basically push out a city manager. And that strikes at the core of our city as a democracy. And if we're going to move forward on all the issues that we've talked about this evening, the first thing we need to do is restore our city manager form of government. My background, my personality, I'm like a moderate Democrat. And what that means is that in my effort to achieve the public good in working with residents or working with my colleagues on city council, what that means is that I'm always looking for consensus. And sometimes that involves generating trade-offs. But that's just the way I am, that I want to achieve the public good, but I want to make sure that everyone benefits by it and is involved, that landlords are working with tenants, that homeowners are working with renters. Because I think that's what makes Alameda special, is when we bring everyone together, recognizing that we're all on an island together that's at risk because of climate change, that you have a city council that's going to work with everyone and try to achieve consensus, even on those tough issues, like dealing with the rent crisis. So I hope to return to City Council in an effort to bring back a strong city form of government.
Well, I wrote down a bunch of stuff. I can talk about my experience, my resume from City Council, Hospital Board, Social Service Board, Human Relations Board, the JPA, the Alameda County Transportation Commission. But let's not do that. Let's focus on what we really care about. We can talk about the budget, sure. Yeah. We can talk about the tenant and landlord issue that's dividing our city. It makes me sad to hear that. Measure K, you're not for Measure K, you're against Measure K. The new Alamedans, the old Alamedans, the union, non-union. But end of the day, doesn't matter which group you belong to. You all care for Alameda. You don't think the tenants care about Alameda? Or the landlords don't? They both care. We're in this together. What I'd like to do is to focus on two issues if I do get on the city council. One of the forum they asked us, what are you going to do the first 100 days? I think public safety. I would really like to address that. An Asian American business owner was killed early part this year. And I saw the husband, and he was devastated. Wife robbed and killed in front of his eyes. I mean, I don't think, how can you ever recover from something like that? And the police keep telling us we're understaffed. 10% understaffed. Why? We can't find good recruits. Baloney. We need to get them accountable. Find out what we can do to help finding good recruits. Fully staff our police. And before I finish, affordable housing for seniors and people with disability. Those are pretty close to my heart. When we talk about development and housing, yes, we need to do all that. But don't forget the seniors. I'm going to be one of them too, soon.
So I'd like to thank the league for hosting this. It's been really great. I'd like to thank all of you. We've had some rather raucous forums in the past. It was nice to have a nice, respectful, through the whole thing, audience. So thank you very much. You know, for me, like I said, I've knocked on a lot of doors. You know, I've read the paper. I've lived here for 17 years. Traffic and transportation is the #1 issue here. It's not going to change. Housing costs are important, etc. You know, for me, when I think about transportation, it's not just the traffic. I sit on a bus that I go to San Francisco every single day. I go across the Park Street Bridge. I sometimes take the O across the island to go through the tubes because I want to know what's happening. And traffic is there and it stinks, right? I experience it. I can confirm that everybody is not crazy. But the other thing about transportation is that it's the thing that connects us. It connects our neighborhoods or it cuts us off. It unites us as Alamedans. And if we do not start to create safe and livable streets, because when you're out there and you're talking to people, people do not feel safe crossing the street. They do not like living on a lot of our streets because of the way that our streets have really been developed. We really need bold and ambitious plans to start addressing, bringing people the things they say they want. So, you know, I agree with Tony. I think that this is an election that really is about, you know, where are we going to go with Alameda? We're going to have some hard decisions coming ahead. I do not think that the economy is going to be going gangbusters. The stock market for the last 2 days maybe pretends something, but we're going to have hard decisions to go. We need to go big. We need ambitious people who can push big plans, bring people together, solve hard issues, and I think that I've had 13 years on the planning board and the transportation commission to show that I can do that. It's why I'm endorsed by the Democrats, by Labor, by business leaders, by Wilma Chan, Alice Leadbicker, Rob Bonta, and many, many others. My website is johnknoxwhite.com, and I encourage you to go there, and most importantly, because I have my email there, and I'm happy to chat with you there as well.
So I also want to thank everyone for coming out on a Thursday night and listening to us talk. My name is Jim Odie, as I said. There's my name on there. I've been your council member for 4 years, and I'd be honored to have another 4 years to serve you. And I ask you to judge me by my entire record and the results I've delivered for Alameda. Winston Churchill said, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." So when you go to the ballot box, you can vote for me and one of these other fine gentlemen. But look at what I've done to make sure that we stay safe. Look at what I've done to help alleviate the housing crisis and take care of our most vulnerable residents. Look at what I've done to help mitigate traffic that comes with development. Look at what I've done to make sure that Alameda is still a great place to live. And one of the reasons I think it's a great place to live is our diversity. And I think it's important that we maintain that diversity. You may look at me and say, well, what does a white guy care about diversity? Because it's true, I'll never know what it feels like to be a black youth that walks down the street and sees a policeman and wonders if he's going to get shot or die. I'll never know what it's like to be a Latino motorist who's driving and pulled over and wondered if his name is getting called in to ICE. I'll never know the discrimination that my daughters who are half Asian have experienced in their life. But I recently got married. I got married in May. I got married in a marriage that a few years ago was not even legal. So I do know what it's like to walk down the street with the person you love and worry about getting your head bashed in. So that is something that's important to me. It's important that we value our diversity. We protect everyone's rights. It's not National Coming Out Day, so I came out a little bit early, but it's a great day to talk about it, and I would be honored to have your support. I would be honored to serve you, all of Alameda, for another 4 years on City Council.
If you go around town and you look at the yard signs, what you're going to see is you're going to see my sign with just about every single mayoral candidate or every single council candidate. And I think that says something about me, and I think that says something about you. I think that you know a good idea when you hear one. I think that you're capable of making a decision. I love this race that it's a nonpartisan race. I think that you can think outside the box. I think that you can evaluate candidates on the merits and on their ideas. If you look at my experience, and some say, well, you know, what kind of experience is that? You know, he was a Little League coach, big deal. That means that I've worked very closely with working families every single day on all types of issues with their kids, getting them to and from, the disabilities that the kids have, the challenges that they have, challenges that the parents have. It put me in touch with a vast part of this island, working for a law firm. It's put me in contact with so many small businesses, and I see the challenges that they face every single day, and I'm here to help them. Participated in Sister City, and I saw all the totality of the communities that we have here and the opportunities that we have to learn and grow. I play ukulele, and I've met our wonderful creative and artistic maker communities out there. We need a strong advocate for our city, and I promise you that. My duty of loyalty would be to you, not to the special interest, to all of the people here in Alameda. And if you're around this weekend, come to our classic car show. My Volvo will be there, as will the ukulele. If you want to ask any follow-up question, it's great. Go to my website, votemats.com.
Thank you. Nice round of applause to our candidates. And thank you again, candidates, for your participation and your willingness to take on this very important role. We've reached the end of our time. Must bring this program to a close. So President Gates-Durr, if you would be so kind, come forward and close out these festivities.
And I promise to be brief. You've been here for a long time. Again, I think a hearty round of applause for our candidates. Thank you. And then I have an apology for one of our candidates, Mr. Motz. We failed to put your name on this cover sheet. It will be corrected immediately on our website, and it will be corrected for the next forum we have on October 25th. Your name, and we'll try to get a picture too. The charts are there, and that's correct. Just an oversight, and we are terribly sorry for that. I'm sorry.
It's an outrage.
It's horrible. And then two things very, very quickly. Our motto is empowering voters, defending democracy. If that sounds like something you might be interested in participating, we're always looking for members. League of Women Voters is open to women and men. We would love for you to stop by our membership table. And finally, don't forget to vote on November 6th.
Or before.
Or before. And you can drop in your mail-in ballots. If you have a mail-in ballot, right outside City Hall, there is a secure ballot box. It's on the corner of Santa Clara and Oak, and please, you can drop them off until 8 o'clock on Election Day.
No postage required.
All right, so, yeah, exactly. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.